Welcome everyone back to our McCormick Care Foundation's podcast called Dementia Journey. April is a month where we celebrate our volunteers, and today we are here with Beth Leibovitz. Leibovitz, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I did it so well prior to our beginning. And Tori Coleman. And I'm really excited to have you both here because I think Volunteer Month or Volunteer Week, whichever way we want to look at it, is so important, especially in organizations like McCormick. The volunteers make such a big difference, but they seem sometimes to be flying under the radar. That they come in, they do what they need to do, they go home, and we're all better for it. But it somehow, maybe, I know everybody says thank you, and I know everybody appreciates it, but this is just a really good opportunity for us to shine a spotlight. And so thank you, Beth, for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
To share a little bit more about this. I think maybe if we get started with each of you just maybe sharing a little bit about yourselves and perhaps what's inspired you either into both of your roles.
Sure. I can start.
All right.
So I started working here at McCormick Care Group about 5 years ago, and my background is therapeutic recreation. So I have been touched by volunteers pretty much since I've started here. We've always had a really solid volunteer base, so it's been really inspiring to see that. But yeah, I think that moving into this volunteer role, the coordinator role, has really opened my eyes about truly the passion that our volunteers have and really what they do contribute to our residents and to our clients. I don't think that, you're right, the way that you kind of describe them coming in under the radar, they come in, they do their role and they leave and we're all better for it. But I don't know if we truly realize the impact that they have on resident care and interaction and engagement. Absolutely. I agree with that.
Well, my background is I started here about 2016. There was the interruption of COVID and I had some surgeries, but I basically have been here all that time. And I was an elementary school teacher for over 30 years and always working with people and kids. And everyone assumed I would be volunteering in a school. But I really love this area, working with adults. One of my motivations is I had an elderly friend who had dementia, and to see her, she was so close that she kind of adopted my boys as grandchildren that she never had. And to see her as the dementia passes was heartbreaking at times, because you have this body of the person that you know and love, but the person and their personalities disappearing, and to see them frustrated and whatnot. And that was one of my inspirations for wanting to help out here. And I truly love working with people here. People are so welcoming, the staff and everybody, and just the residents that I was on second floor, so they're a little higher functioning than where I am now in Memory Lane. But so the people on second floor, I sometimes would get a thank you, and that's not why I'm doing it in the least bit. Or they might remember my name. And I just find it really rewarding that this is something I do not want to miss every week, and I don't unless something comes up or if I'm sick, something like that. That
cold factor has become a real thing. For all of us here. Well, for anybody in long-term care and working with a vulnerable population. I would say, so thank you. You shared your inspiration. That was perfect for why you were here. And Tori, what inspired you to move into that volunteer space? Just the knowing and seeing the impact?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I developed relationships with a lot of the volunteers and just seeing kind of their passions come out and their strengths come out. And I'm in it for a lot of similar reasons volunteers are. I'm passionate for working with older adults and working with people specifically who have a dementia diagnosis. I understand therapeutic recreation and the interventions that are provided that help people with dementia and managing responsive behaviors and all those things. So volunteers do all of those things. And they are doing that out of the kindness of their hearts, honestly, and they're passionate about that too. So
I'm sitting here thinking, I know well what volunteers do. I see them all the time, and I've gotten to know many of them. But I'm thinking about people who may be watching this. What does an average day, or what are some of the activities that volunteers are doing when they do come here? Because I think you've got multiple roles.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the volunteer and what their strengths are too. So sometimes we do have a lot of flexibility with volunteer roles. So say we have an individual who is a retired nurse and they still want to utilize some of their nursing skills. So we can have them come in and assist with meal times, but then they still want to have that interaction with residents or with clients. And then they transition to that more like life enrichment or recreation support role. So it really depends on the individual, but like a list, I guess, of volunteer opportunities are, like I said, mealtime assisting, life enrichment, one-to-one visiting for people who maybe are a little bit more introverted. We have tuck shop attendants, gardening, the list goes on and on. Admin support. There's so many opportunities. And like I said, if the volunteer comes in and says, this is my skill set, I'm sure we can find a role for them and what fits their strengths and their wants with their role as well.
And one of the things of being a volunteer too is being really flexible. That I work with Sabrina Summers, and so she was on second floor. And when she was on second floor, I did different things. Like I had a knitting group that I ran on a pretty regular basis. I would play euchre with people. Now that we're in memory lane, it's very different. And Sabrina and I will often talk when I first come in, and it's things like doing crafts, or they really like, a lot of the women in memory lane wear nail polish, and they really get a lot of joy out of that. So it's like we say, oh, we're having a spa, and what we're really doing is making a cup of tea, taking the old polish off, putting new polish on, and bring some joy. The other thing that I do quite often and I really enjoy is helping with FaceTime calls, because on memory lane, the residents there, if it's a FaceTime, they say wouldn't hold the iPad correctly, or they might press the wrong button and then the call's ended. So, and one woman that I work with every week, we do a FaceTime with her son who lives in Florida, and I often will keep the conversation going, not monopolizing it, but just sort of saying, oh, do you remember when? Or he loves walking around his house showing photographs of things they did. Like one thing they did a long time ago was whitewater rafting. And I'll say to him, oh, I remember you did a trip in whitewater rafting. So he'll walk the iPad over, and then he'll talk about it to his mom, and things like I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's the FaceTime I find very rewarding, because you're just sort of enabling the call to be successful. That's all. And a lot of enjoyment there.
I think that's what a unique experience and unique opportunity. And I'm sure most people who have worked with individuals or have somebody who in their lives who have dementia, they know, because this two-dimensional piece that's talking back to you sometimes requires that facilitator to make this person real and alive again and keep in the moment.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, so it's
fun.
Yeah, and then also the fact that you are consistently there and can then pick up those pieces to you remember about the trip, or you remember about this. And so
that's correct. Yeah,
having that consistent facilitator you're becoming part of the family.
And I was just going to say that. I think it's about relationships.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? So not only are you building relationships with the residents, but their families, the care partners, right?
Oh, that's part of it. Now, when I was on second, I felt it was more so the relationships with the residents themselves, because some of them would remember you.
Yes.
And sometimes their family would come in at the same, say on a Wednesday afternoon, it'd be the same person, so I'd talk to them or whatever. There was one man who was on second at the time that he was instrumental in London's wastewater Center.
Yes. Yeah.
He was an engineer from Toronto. And I happened to mention that myself and my friend, grade 7 trip, we went there.
Oh.
And so that stuck for him. So when he'd see me, he'd talk about it. What he went through, and they stayed in London afterwards, which was kind of neat. So we had this, and the other thing he remembered about me, not my name, and that's fine, it doesn't matter, but that I had 2 boys.
Oh.
So every week he would say, well, how are your boys doing? Kind of deal. And there was a connection. Harder on memory lane, but doesn't matter. I mean, people are friendly. There's a man on memory lane who had a cottage, and my family has a cottage, so I'll often ask him, so how's your cottage doing? Have you been up to it yet? And, we'll have a conversation about it, things like that, little connections,
And that kind of storytelling, story sharing kind of components, I think are what keep us all connected in some way, shape, or form. You had me thinking about a lot of things, and then you kept going, and I've lost
sorry.
it. No, it's all good. It's all good. I was. I know what I wanted to share. So the nail polish piece, I have to share. So I was in, and I won't mention her name, but I saw one of the residents, and I said, "Oh, your nails are so beautiful." And she looked down and said, "Not really. It's time for a change." I said, "Oh, okay."
Some of them every week they like a different color, or whatever. But I just want to tell you one funny story that when I was on 2nd floor and doing euchre, I've told this to Tori, so she knows what I'm going to say. But my first time playing euchre with the group, I didn't know the level that people were at, and I always like to treat a person, with respect and where they might be. So I kind of played dumb, which was a big mistake because one of my first hands I had was a lone hand. So for people who don't know euchre, that means you've got all the high cards, and you should say, I'm going alone. You get 4 points for your partner.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do that. And my partner, who was a fairly outspoken gentleman, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, he picked up right away what I had done. So for the rest of that game, and for every other hand, he was chewing me out. And so when a new hand would start, he'd say, now, Beth, remember, you got to play the game. I said, no, I know that. I promise I will. But just things like that, you don't know. And you have to remember they're people.
Yes.
And they have these, they know what they're doing a lot of the time, or there's little sparks,
Yeah, well, people who have heard me before, I often say, I remind myself every day when I walk in that this is not just a place of work. I'm actually walking into somebody's home, and to remain mindful of that.
Absolutely. I love it when residents, even memory lane or when I was on 2nd floor, reminiscing is so powerful. And I love hearing people reminiscing about whatever the topic is. And when I ran the knitting group, a lot of the women would talk about their grandmother or their mother teaching them at age whatever, and they would hold their needles a certain way because that's how they were taught, and they still do to this day. And they may be dropping stitches. It didn't matter. They held their things. So we never really made anything except squares, and that's fine.
Yes.
And some of them, they were wholly squares, but it didn't matter. They were doing something meaningful, Yeah.
I love that. And I think for each life that gets touched, right, it's a moment of joy in their day. And that's the point of having volunteers come in, or that's the point of, what the foundation tries to help support and fund, is to make sure, care, of course, is part of it, a large part of it, but part of the care is that holistic side of things.
Absolutely.
There's, and we've also chatted on this podcast in the past, but coming to McCormick Home is, you are coming here to live, and it's important we remain focused on that fact. So anyways, I just love that. So I'm wondering, we've talked about some of those activities that you guys engage with. Beth, do you have a favorite thing that you do with people?
Well, on memory lane, one of my favorite things would be doing when we have tea and we do the nails, because the women are just, they're just getting so much joy out of it. They can choose whatever color they want. We don't file their nails, but one thing we do is a hand massage.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes the men will say to me, can I have one too? Absolutely. Do you want clear polish on your nails too? Usually they say no, but I just, but the hand massage. So that's one of the things that are really big. And when you talked about touching the lives of the residents here, they're touched my lives every week I'm in, because you don't know what it's going to be like. Sometimes when I'm in, people seem to be kind of grumpy or tired, and you sort of sense, how much can I sort of push people to do the activity that we kind of want. You got to be flexible. It's like teaching too, so much. But they touch my life too. So when I'm leaving, I usually contact my sons later in the day and I say, guess what I did today? They humor their mom,
Yeah. Oh, that's cute. That's cute. Yeah. So I'm thinking, Beth, you said you started in 2016, is that right?
About that. It took a while for the police check and everything to get, so I think fall of 2016.
Yeah. And so, and then there's sort of the pre-COVID time and the post-COVID time. And maybe, Tori, you can speak to, sort of how many volunteers where are we at in that volunteer recruitment process, et cetera?
So we're still definitely in that recruitment phase, I would say. Yeah. Pre-COVID, we had over 100 volunteers in the building, even more than that, hundreds.
Like on a daily basis, kind of?
On a daily basis, it would probably be maybe 30 to 40.
That's quite a few, though.
Yeah,
it's
and
amazing.
Supporting in so many different roles.
That's more than quite a few. It's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. So we had people come in for just meal times or for the tuck shop. We had the tuck shop open every day, right? And there were certain shifts. There were shifts in the day program, and they were practically filled. So, it's a lot different now. So we are at about 70 registered.
That's excellent. Good.
Yeah, we're getting there, right? Good. It takes time. But also with the recruitment process, there's a lot of those requirements that come along with it.
Yeah, and the police check took a while. Like in the new, I'm assuming it's still the same where you had to do a TB test.
Yes.
Like by the time you got everything done, it wasn't like you were, Tori, I want to volunteer. I'll start next week. It takes a while, and understandably so. I understand everything we had to do, because you want to be careful and whatnot.
Absolutely. And there's certain things that we cannot be flexible on, right? Those are mandated, right? So, the police check, and there is a cost associated with that, and then also the TB test, 2-step. We do require 3 references, and then also there is the orientation component too. Previously, one thing that I got feedback from the volunteers was on the online orientation process. It was quite challenging for a lot of volunteers.
That's a very polite word.
It was a challenge. So
you did an excellent job making it so much, simplifying it.
Thanks,
so it was doable and not this drudgery putting in. I don't know how many hours we put in before. Yeah.
6 hours. Yeah. So instead,
and that's a big time commitment for people to make as well.
Absolutely.
That's the thing.
This is almost a barrier to
for
some people it would be.
Yeah, exactly. For some people it is a barrier, right? So to have to do all this online orientation plus invest money into the requirements and everything, and by the time you actually start, sometimes it takes a few months, right? So it's a huge time commitment before you're even actually interacting with residents and clients. So that is a barrier at times. Also, another trend that I'm kind of noticing in volunteering itself is that people, if it's not flexible for them, it really has to meet people's schedules. They won't do it. We have to, which makes sense, right? And because they're donating their time, right? So it makes sense. So we have to ensure that there's flexibility there, which we are pretty flexible. Like if you're on vacation or our tuck shop is a super flexible role. Like people send me their availability a month in advance. We plug you in and then I let you know when you're on the schedule. So there is opportunities for that type of flexibility as well. But if people don't align with our values or say if this isn't the right setting for them, they come in one time and then they say, you know what, this isn't for me. And that's totally okay too. So it's just finding, recruiting for the people who will excel in these roles, who are adaptable, who have a passion for providing care and engagement with residents and clients, and understanding dementia. I find that with the stigma with dementia and long-term care, that really poses a challenge too for volunteering. For instance, I went to a volunteer fair before we had our McCormick Care Group tablecloth done. So I used dementia services. So I would have people walking through and they'd go, oh, dementia, I won't do well there. Or, oh, dementia, like, I don't know if that's something for me. So there is still a stigma.
That's too bad.
It is too bad.
Did they share why, or they just sort of made the passing comment?
So the one individual that walked by, I said, oh, can you tell me why? She was quite, like, she was in high school. So I think it was just a little out of her comfort zone, and I get it. But even with the pandemic and the light that was shed on long-term care wasn't the nicest. So when people hear volunteering in long-term care, I'm not sure. There's still that stigma is essentially what I'm saying. So kind of what you said earlier, saying that this isn't just long-term care. This is where people live. This is their home, and they are living here. We are still living. We have fun, and we have a good time here. And I always bring pictures to my volunteer fairs and show them, like, this is what we do here.
Right. That's perfect, because that's worth 1,000 words.
Exactly.
And we have to remember too, everybody here is an individual, so, and they're at all different levels. And it's sad to see them when the levels, when there's more progression with the dementia, but that's part of where they're at. So you just have to take them for where they're at. I just wanted to add with the volunteers that for the recreational specialist point of view, they're counting on you coming. So if you can't come, I always want to give lots of warning, because they're planning their schedules.
Right.
Based on the fact on, oh, Beth's going to come Wednesday afternoon, and so-and-so's going to be here. And if you're absent a lot, then that's really going to be hard on them also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think consistency is important for sure, but I think that also helps with building relationships with volunteers. So Sabrina and Beth have been paired together since 2016, right? So you guys know each other really well, and Sabrina knows your strengths, knows what you enjoy doing, so she will have things ready for you, right? So it's so nice to see volunteers not as someone there as a helping hand, but you're a member of our team.
I feel I'm part of the team.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think it really helps being a flexible person. Like I'll do anything, and she knows that even if it doesn't sound the most exciting, I'll do it. I'll give it a try. So,
well, I was just thinking about Sabrina, and even back to that relationship perspective, right? Building that relationship with that recreationist, then she can customize and build the program in ways for the residents that, not knowing you, she might not build out a more as robust of a program, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And so Beth, like, what I'm trying to get to is the heart of. I think volunteering is a little bit of a lost art, and I hear it from many people. I mean, I don't know if our current younger generations understand how much our current society is actually built on volunteerism and community spirit. If you even going back to, quote, the silent generation, the boomers, I mean, when the community got together and built something, they did it together even before governments or municipalities had tax dollars to actually implement these things. Like, it was really, really, truly built on volunteerism. And as time has gone on, and then I think COVID, as we just discussed, made a bit of an impact in terms of volunteering. So I'm trying to come to, did you always know you were going to volunteer? And then I don't know, what was that spark that
well, I
worked for
think
you?
Partly, like when I was working, I just didn't have the time, and when you're raising a family. But it's something that I've always enjoyed working. When I say working, I don't mean necessarily a job working, but interacting with people.
Right.
And I guess what really spurred me on when I retired was my elderly friend who had dementia. And she spent a lot of time, and she wasn't here in London, but she spent a lot of time by herself. And it just really bothered me, that because a person with dementia needs stimulation. They need someone to talk to them, show an interest in them, and just to sit there because, in her case, she used to be an avid reader and she reached a point where you couldn't read because you couldn't retain the story. And that would be natural. I tried like short story books with her. I tried large print and eventually it just didn't work. Right. You know, and maybe some people just watch TV. I don't really know. But I think that the interaction is so important for people.
Well, and you probably, being a recreation therapist, recreation therapist. Did I say it right the first time? But, our next podcast is going to be with Becky Clark from the Day Program to talk about the impact of recreation and the importance of it all. And I'm coming to learn so much more about this. Obviously, the medical side is something that's super important, but staying active, keeping your mind active, these are all parts. But I think it's not just for people with dementia. I think all of us require this.
Oh, absolutely.
And then the connection, the interaction with people. I think it's super important for everyone. My mother will tell me, no, she's going to be good by herself, but I think differently. And she'll chastise me later, I'm sure.
I think that it's that bringing meaning to someone's life. But I will say with volunteering, of course, we're bringing a lot of meaning and purpose into people's lives. So I bring volunteers into the organization, but I think it works on both sides. Volunteers are here for whatever reason. It's 99% of the time an intrinsic motivator. Yeah. Whether the person has deep roots with McCormick, whether they had a family member who lived here or someone who attended the day program. I feel like we have so many connections within our community and we've touched so many lives as an organization. But I will say that volunteers are here because they want to be here and this is their passion.
I think people should send us volunteer stories, past and present volunteer stories that they've had with McCormick. That would be, or even not with McCormick. I think that would be super interesting to hear more about that.
I think that would be really interesting to hear because everybody, just like the residents here being individuals, every volunteer has different experiences and some weeks just aren't as great as others for whatever reason. But overall, super rewarding.
So, Tori, I'm wondering, where do most of the volunteers come from?
Well, actually, we just did a volunteer survey. So I can talk about the ages of most of our volunteers are 65 plus, to be honest. Okay, so we do have a lot of people who are retired that volunteer with us. But I will say, a lot of the volunteers that I have onboarded more recently, too, are students from Western and Fanshawe gaining experience. A lot of our students are applying to medical school or to grad school, and they're looking for experience interacting with our clients and residents.
And is it just interacting, or what other things would they do that would help build that resume piece?
So it really depends on the volunteer, right? So we do have most of them, I will say, it's about building bedside manner or interacting with people who have dementia or different types of dementia. But we do have certain volunteers that have skill-based from previous volunteer experiences as well. So I'm thinking of one volunteer in particular. She taught technology classes with seniors. So when I heard this, I went, ding, 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 we need that. So she's actually a one-to-one visitor, so she still does that. But whenever we have an individual who needs some help, we will definitely pair her with them. She actually helped with the resident survey that we did last year as well. So she went around and helped out the residents fill out the online survey. And family members too. She's been a
that
great
technology
help.
Piece. That's something really interesting too. I mean, I was speaking with a couple of residents who said they do need help in that space, and they are sometimes the connection falls off or something doesn't work. And I don't know, it could be user, it could be the tech, it could be, we all struggle with that kind of side of the equation. But I think this is their way of staying connected with that outside world. And it is so important with them. That's how I stay connected with my family who don't live in the city. And so I can see how that would be something really meaningful. That's really great, but only one.
One so far, but
the opportunity.
There's a lot of opportunity. And like I said, it's really based on volunteers' skill. Like, what do you enjoy doing? What are you skilled at? What are you going to school for? Right?
Yeah.
Are you a teacher? Right? Retired volunteers, right?
And I think oftentimes when people think about volunteering, back to Beth's earlier comment, that they think about volunteering in the school or volunteering with children more perhaps than they do with the adults. And I have to say, I certainly enjoy the older adults. I enjoy both ends of the spectrum, but truly at the end of the day, there's something fun. You can have a lot of, easy banter and learn a lot of historical stories or moments. The learning, actually, it's fascinating.
I find too, though, because I had my primary education specialist and I worked mainly with grade 1 and grade 2, without trying to put any of the residents down, there is a lot of overlap of depending where they're at with their dementia. I'm using a lot of the skills that I would have used in the classroom too.
Well, skills is a great segue. So, Tori, I'm thinking about, so it's great the volunteers bring skill sets with them, but what does McCormick offer in terms of helping build additional skills? Or do they? I mean,
yeah, we do. We do. So, as you know, we've recently hired a learning and development coordinator. So she's bringing a lot of opportunity for staff.
Yeah.
And we are also able to offer all of those opportunities to volunteers as well, which is amazing because volunteers are a part of the team, right? So I think one of the big ones is GPA, or gentle persuasive approaches. We've been able to offer that to our volunteers.
But maybe, so it sounds intuitive, but maybe can just explain what that is just a little bit.
Yeah. So for people who have a dementia diagnosis, sometimes they experience responsive behaviors. So usually that's because of an unmet need. Responsive behaviors can come out as wandering, maybe calling out, exit seeking, things like that. So we kind of have to put on our investigator hat, right? And figure out, okay, so what is the unmet need for this individual? And how can we meet that need to make them feel more comfortable?
Yeah.
Right. So teaching volunteers this is extremely important, right? Because a lot of the times you are approached with people who may be experiencing responsive behaviors. So providing volunteers with that additional education, that additional tool, right? It makes a big difference in the residents' care or the client's care and experience too. So just giving them those tools so that they're able to meet the residents' needs, right? And clients as well.
And do you have an example of what that might look like?
Yeah.
Or I don't know, Beth, maybe you do too. I don't know, but.
Well, so for instance, let's think. Memory lane, it happens frequently where we have a gentleman who he tends to walk around all the time.
Oh, yes.
So sometimes it could be that he has to use the washroom and he can't find the washroom.
Right.
Maybe he just wants to go outside and have some fresh air. So maybe with a volunteer, understanding his needs and saying, okay, so this gentleman feels like he needs to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Taking him outside.
Well, we have the garden too. I love McCormick Home for lots of reasons, but one is because on each side there are these self-contained gardens. So Memory Lane has its own garden. And you're right, that person, like even if the weather isn't terrific, as long as it's not raining or snowing, I mean, it's like, hey, do you want to go outside for a little bit? He and I have connected a little bit because he wears Skechers shoes.
Okay.
And I've had surgery recently. So right now I'm still wearing Skechers because of all the, the padding and everything in it. So I'll look down and say, hey, you got your Skechers on today. And I've got a pair just like his.
Oh, awesome.
Which I've worn a couple of times, and I'll say, hey, look at your shoes. Look at my shoes. They're the same. Yeah. Want to go out in the garden, walk around for a little bit? And it's usually, he will. But a lot of times it's also residents that have decided they're going to go home.
Oh, yeah.
They've got their coat on, or they're just, or they think someone was supposed to come for them and they haven't. And sometimes with that, it's sort of a distraction, but in a nice way, where you might, again, the garden's used for lots of great reasons, but it might be so-and-so. Why don't we go out and we'll walk around a little bit? Or maybe you'll go home after dinner. And by then they've forgotten. And I don't think that's a mean thing to delay things, but because they're angsting at the time. Yes. So any way you can kind of relay that angsting that they're going through, because they just get sometimes it's getting set on one thing and just not being able to get off that. Yeah,
and move to the next.
Or let's have a FaceTime. Let's see if your son's in or your daughter's in, and
I think that's so important, Beth, is just living in their moment. Yeah. Maybe it's not reality per se, but let's live in that moment. I think about that. Yeah, in the day program, right? It's their reality for sure. And it's people want to go home a lot, right? And that does happen. And so, for instance, I think of some of the ladies who were homemakers. They were always at home and they had their kids and they're like, oh my gosh, my kids, I need to go home. They're at home by themselves.
That's right.
And then you say, actually, you know what, Mary? It's only 12 o'clock and they're still at school.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so it's providing volunteers those types of tools.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is observation too. We have a lot of staff here who have been here for many, many years, and they are so smart in their approaches with people and kind of have the sayings, you know what I mean? To really bring people down.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So just even observing them and hearing the things that they say to residents and clients, and it's so helpful.
I speak very highly of McCormick Home. Like if I'm talking to other people, maybe I drive them crazy at times, I don't know. But just the care that's here, and it's just so good on so many levels, and you see the nurses and the PSWs, and it's not, to me, it doesn't seem like they're just doing their job, that they are, hey, so-and-so, let's go get cleaned up. We'll have a shower, and you'll feel really great when you come out and the hair's combed and, they're looking great. And,
my father-in-law, people have also heard me speak of my father-in-law, who was here for a period of time as well. And, it just had me think from that staff perspective, they are as much family to him as we were to him. And sorry, I hit my microphone. That was my funny face. But I remember, and he passed this September past, but I remember having a conversation with one of the nurses on that floor, and we were chatting, and we saw each other. Oh, how's the family? What's going on? How are the kids? And, anyways, because they knew us all so well, right? And then he says, I miss my late night conversations with Lino because he would wake up in the middle of the night, and sometimes he just didn't want to go back to sleep or couldn't get back to sleep. And they would have, long conversations because it's the middle of the night and most people were asleep. Yeah. And I think about these times, and I think about the staff and the volunteers who get to know the residents so very well, that they do, like we do say McCormick family a lot, but the more people I talk to in these kind of circumstances, the more I actually see how much of a family everybody has actually become. And it's a beautiful thing, and that supportive nature. And so I'm thinking about the volunteers and how they connect. Now, because you work a shift, do you get to connect often with volunteers? Other volunteers that come?
It's funny, Tori and I have talked about this a little bit. There's the day that I come in Wednesday afternoons, and there is another person that consistently comes into that time. So we'll talk a little bit, but I don't really see other people. And that doesn't bother me because my focus is obviously going to work with the residents. But, and I mean, Tori's just so easy to talk to if I have any issues. I mean, it's great. So
Yeah.
we're so happy that she's in the role she's in.
Well, and I think this is another reason why, another thing that makes McCormick special is we have our McCormick Care Group Board of Directors, and which began as the Women's Christian Association. And
I remember
of
that.
course, they of course began all of this as a volunteer organization. And then through raised funds, invested wisely, there is money available to help pay for a salary like Tori's because the government doesn't fund these kind of positions. And so it's really nice to see, this is another advantage we have. But on top of that, what I see is the work you're doing with these volunteers translates into other organizations, because I find most people, when they volunteer in one place, they often volunteer somewhere else as well. And they I'm going to say, share that love around. I'm wondering, Tori, I just want to touch on that Learning and Development Center. And I don't know, Beth, if you're familiar about it. It's really quite new. We're just in the early stages of beginning to raise funds for a Learning and Development Center here at McCormick. And the purpose is to our purpose is to raise the money to help, infill that space. But it's going to be about educating staff, volunteers, students, such that, and providing them a space to do it in a really meaningful way, in a comfortable way, but also it'll have a simulation lab. So there will be, an eating area or a tub with a lift or, a toilet, and all of these things that you can think of to create scenarios to properly train people in whatever it is that they're going to do, because everybody requires different types of training.
That's excellent.
So we're really excited. The total project cost is about $1 million, and the foundation is looking to raise half of that. And so I'm bringing that forward, and I'm giving ourselves a little plug there about all of this. But maybe, Tori, you can elaborate, if you can, a little bit on how you see volunteers benefiting with this, and even perhaps the students and other community partners, because I think that's part of your role in terms of that community partnership piece.
Yeah, I think for volunteers in particular, I think about specific roles. So with the life enrichment role, especially being assigned to memory lane or the day program, because we are working specifically with people who have a dementia diagnosis. So I think that the simulation lab will be so important for volunteers, especially when we're providing that GPA training. But even I'm thinking about our mealtime assisting volunteers. We do have an online training that we complete alongside the volunteers. I do. And then we also do like a shadowing shift. And then if the volunteer feels comfortable, they're able to kind of go on their own and go see, check in with the nursing staff. But I feel like having that simulation lab and able to actually feed, I just think that would be
We're having
amazing.
a mannequin, a fully functioning mannequin.
That's Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
So it's so exciting.
Maybe two, I don't know, but anyways.
Two.
So there
but yeah, I think that is just so exciting to be able to kind of have that additional training on top of that too. That
I should mention too, the way I understand it is there's a better name than mannequin, but I understand it can be pre-programmed with a response. So if what you're training is about, feeding, then
a choking hazard or something like that, right?
So it can be pre-programmed to have a response.
Isn't that cool?
That is amazing.
Right?
Yeah. So you're not being nervous because if you're working with a real person, you don't feel quite comfortable. You can work with a mannequin.
Exactly.
And
and the thing is, we would never pair a volunteer with someone who has a super high choking risk.
Of course.
We would not do that to them unless that individual is comfortable and they are a retired nurse or a retired physician, because we do have volunteers. Right? Yeah. So they are comfortable with that. And and we'll use those skills, of course. Right. But it's so exciting to be able to provide that opportunity for someone who is 16, brand new to long-term care. I'm willing to do anything. And I'm like, okay, well, how about mealtime? Ooh, I'm not so sure. Yeah. But if we're able to provide that experience to someone, I think that people would be more apt to help in those kind of more, I would say, uncomfortable kind of roles, because that's not comfortable for everybody.
Yeah.
And then in regards to students, oh my gosh. So we've done a whole revamp on the orientation process. So it would just be such an added benefit to them. We do have our IPAC, Infection Prevention and Control Manager, come in, but to be able to do some practical IPAC training, like we do glow germ, we do
So what is glow germ?
Okay, so glow germ is like they put lotion on their hands and then they wash it off, and then we put a black light on their hands to see if they've actually properly washed their hands. Okay. So that's fun.
Yeah. Anybody always take off their rings and make sure?
They're supposed to.
I always did that with my grade 1s, and they just freaked out at their hands because it's purple, or like it's a wild color that, and they think they've cleaned their hands and they haven't. It was just, I always had a big smile on my face.
It is so important to do that in this setting, right?
Yes.
So the glow germ, we do that already. But I think in a lab setting, it would be excellent to have the mannequin set up and say, okay, so this mannequin has this virus right now and it's airborne or whatever. What's the PPE you would do to go in and start their care, and actually have them show you, right? So that you know they're prepared to interact with our residents.
Well, and I would think it's one thing to know what the PPE, which PPE to choose, but another thing on how to don it.
No kidding.
I got to tell you, Sabrina, she and I were laughing our heads off because I was in memory lane. There was an outbreak and we needed the N95 mask, but I picked the child size. So I don't know if it was child size, but it was super small. Yeah. And I'm like, I couldn't get it over my ponytail that I had. Yeah. Anyways, Sabrina came over. Let me help you. I felt badly because she was in the middle of something else. Anyway, so like I say, obviously I can use this too, but
everyone.
Yeah, one thing to know. Yeah, I would say N95 mask, but how do you put it on? How do you don it?
Oh, that's important, because if not, you're killing the back of your ears.
Yes.
Well, and what's the point in wearing the PPE if you're not wearing it properly, right? Yeah. It needs to be done and doffed properly.
That's right.
So to be able to evaluate that with our students, ensure that they're having a good experience and ensuring that they're providing proper care to our residents, right? And to our clients, it's going to be such a game changer at the Learning and Development Center. I think that
I love the idea of that.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. And it really does advance care. Absolutely. I think that it kind of gives us a one-up, to be honest.
Well, what I also love about it is, not only is it awesome for staff and volunteers here at McCormick, but I think, it's just demonstrating one more time how McCormick is a leader in both long-term and dementia care.
Absolutely.
Because, and especially whether it's staff, hopefully our staff are staying with us, but when it's students who are coming in to do placement, we're training that next generation who are going to be going to other places. And I gave myself goosebumps because, that's really remarkable to have that opportunity, to have this space. And I think about how many people in our community who are moving into this aging space. And I think about the numbers of people who are going to be diagnosed with some form of dementia.
That's right.
And, there is no cure for aging, sadly. So this is what it looks like. And to know then that we're investing in the people who provide the care, to make sure that we have people who can provide care, I think is so important. And
would family also be able to use this lab? I don't know the circumstances, because as a family member, there's so many things that are so overwhelming with dementia. You're grieving because you're losing this person, but then if they're still at home with you, or you bring them home for a short time, or you're with them, to know how to feed them or some of these other things would be really important.
I think there's a ton of opportunity for that. Even in the day program, they already provide the education series for care partners.
Right.
So maybe actually hosting that in the Learning and Development Center, right? And then using those skills and practical skills that you're teaching in the education with the mannequin, right?
Yeah.
I think there's definitely opportunity for that.
I just think that would be really good, because if for family members, this is such an overwhelming time for them. And that's why this support is so important on all levels.
Yes,
I think.
Absolutely.
It's really the integration of all the team, right? And so I think this is where we have to loop back in. The volunteers are like definitely part of that team component, and how lucky we are that they come to do this, because we can't afford to pay them, but we can't afford not to have them. Mm-hmm. And so it's understanding, the best way to show gratitude. And this is why we thought we'd do this podcast today, because it's shining the spotlight on volunteers and what they do, how they help, and the impact that they make. And we're going to spend, the next little bit on our socials, sharing a little bit of how, showing the love, maybe that's the way I'll put it, sharing the love, and where staff are coming and saying, this is why we love our volunteers. And so I would recommend to look on our socials for that. And we're coming up to a close, and I just want to ask each of you, is there anything you wanted to share that you didn't get an opportunity to share?
There is one thing I want to share. Okay. So recently, we've implemented a lot of more team building activities with our volunteer team. And we had our first ever lunch and learn in January. Mm-hmm.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was.
We still talk about that,
don't we? So we held that lunch and learn at a local restaurant. And I had what I thought was this great idea to have an award for a volunteer, similar to our employee values award. I'm like, we should have a volunteer values award. Like, our volunteers display our values, our guiding principles every single day, every shift they come in. We need this. Yeah. They're like, no. I'm like, what? This is a great idea. This is a great form of appreciation, of recognition. They said, no, we would rather be celebrated as a team.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh. And that's when I realized the kind of volunteers that we have here within the organization. They are not here for awards. They are here because you are passionate about it. You have these intrinsic motivators. Their reason is different. And it's just, I think that was the kicking kind of moment where I was just like, okay, I get it now.
Oh, geez, you just about made me cry there. But, I can so appreciate that, because you see, I don't know, the connection and the connectedness. And wow, that's, anyway, it's very powerful to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really, you're volunteering for a purposeful reason. Mm-hmm. And it's not for accolades.
No, It's not in the least bit. At all. It's just, and making a difference is why I'm doing it too. I love volunteering and making a difference in a person's life,
And it's building that community, and whether the community is here or anywhere. And and Beth, anything you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance?
I think I've shared. I'm fine. I think I've shared everything. But yeah, definitely. I really just love being a volunteer here.
Well, Beth, I want to say thank you so much for all that you do, for joining us today on this podcast. Tori, thank you for reaching out to Beth and asking her to join us, and for yourself joining us and sharing all your wonderful insights. And I just want to give a big shout out to all the volunteers out there, because you guys truly make a difference. And I hope today's episode helped shine a little bit of a light on what volunteers do. I'd also like to invite all of you to check out our socials to see what we have to say about our volunteers. And I want to wish you all a very happy volunteer month. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time.